Hello, everyone. In today's story, in a land where shadows stretch long across forgotten ruins and the whispers of old gods stir the wind, three unlikely companions set forth into an ancient dungeon. Guided by wolves older than the forest itself, they seek a book said to hold the very secrets of their world. But within those stone halls lie traps, puzzles, and dangers meant to keep its truth hidden forever. Stay with us and listen closely, for what unfolds is not just a story of adventure, but of friendship, courage, and the mysteries that shape their world. The Tome of Silent Ages. The morning mist lay thick upon the rolling hills, soft and silver like a blanket woven by the night. Dewdrops sparkled on the grass, each one catching the faint light of dawn as if the world itself was sprinkled with stars. Bramble tugged his cloak tighter, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon where the forest gave way to open meadow. It was rare for them to wander so far from the shelter of the woods, but something had pulled them here, some whisper of instinct none could quite name. Alder walked just ahead, his staff tapping against the stone path with every step. "The air feels different today," he murmured, his voice calm but tinged with unease. "Listen, the birds are quieter than usual." Perrin, ever the most eager of the group, tilted his head. "Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe something's watching us." His grin betrayed more excitement than fear. "Wouldn't that be thrilling?" Lark scowled, brushing her braid back over her shoulder. "Thrilling is one word for it. Foolish is another." Yet even she could not deny the strange thrum in her chest, a quiet calling that seemed to urge them forward. They didn't have to wait long for the mystery to reveal itself. A deep, resonant howl rolled across the hills, low and powerful, carrying through the mist. The adventurers froze, their hearts leaping. It was unlike any wolf call they had ever heard in stories or songs. Older, larger, as though the land itself had taken a voice. Before they could speak, shadows moved in the fog. One, then another, then three great shapes padded forward, their paws silent upon the earth. The wolves emerged into view, massive creatures, taller than any horse, their fur glimmering silver gray with streaks of moonlight clinging even in the dawn. Their eyes glowed not with menace, but with a steady, ancient light. Perrin stepped back instinctively, his hand brushing the hilt of his dagger. "They're enormous," he whispered, unable to keep off from his voice. "Hold," Alder said firmly, raising a hand. "No saden moves. Look at their posture. They aren't hunting us." Indeed, the wolves did not bare their teeth or lower themselves to pounce. Instead, the largest among them, its fur white as snow, its muzzle marked with faint scars, lowered its head in what could only be called a gesture of recognition. It was as if the wolf were greeting them, measuring their worth. The group stood still, hearts pounding, until Bramble, despite his usual wariness, slowly stepped forward. "We mean no harm," he said, his voice steady, though his palms were damp with sweat. "We're travelers, seekers. If you'll allow us, we would walk beside you, not against you." The wolf lifted its gaze, amber eyes locking with Bramble's. For a long, breathless moment, the air was heavy with silence. Then the great beast exhaled a huff of warm breath, brushed its massive head against Bramble's shoulder like a test, and turned back toward the mist. With a flick of its tail, it beckoned. "They want us to follow," Lark whispered, her lips parted in astonishment. Perrin grinned wide. "Well, this just got interesting." And so they did. The wolves led them off the stone path, across the meadow, and into a wild stretch of land none of them had dared to explore before. It was as though the earth shifted around them with every step, the air growing richer, the light spilling golden through the fog. Time blurred as the adventurers kept pace beside their newfound companions, the wolves weaving through rock and thicket with effortless grace. By nightfall, they reached a clearing deep in the hills, where an ancient stone circle rose from the ground like teeth of giants. Moss covered the stones, but carvings could still be seen. Spirals, stars, and runes long forgotten. The wolves lay down around the circle, as if this place was sacred. Alder's staff glowed faintly as he traced a hand over the carvings. "This is older than the oldest stories," he breathed. "We shouldn't even be here." Bramble shook his head, eyes fixed on the wolves. "No, we're meant to be here. They brought us." The white wolf lifted its head, gaze piercing the fire they lit for warmth. And in that flickering glow, it felt almost as though the creature was waiting, guarding, until the adventurers proved ready to uncover whatever truth this land still held. The fire crackled in the circle of stones, its smoke spiraling into the star-splashed sky. Around it, the adventurers rested after a long day's march. Their newfound wolf companions sprawled like silent guardians just beyond the light. The air was alive with the scent of moss and earth, and somewhere in the hills an owl called, echoing across the dark. For the first time since they had set out, the group allowed themselves to breathe. The wolves seemed to expect no immediate action, as if time itself bent here, giving them a chance to gather strength. Perrin was the first to break the quiet. He stretched his legs toward the fire, grinning as sparks drifted upward. "Well, if no one else will say it, I think we've just made the best friends of our lives. Giant wolves. Can you imagine the faces of the folk back home when we tell them? They'll call you mad," Lark muttered, pulling her cloak tighter. Her sharp eyes glinted in the firelight, suspicious even in rest. And truth be told, they'd be right. Following beasts into the wild, what are we thinking? Alder, seated cross-legged with his staff across his knees, spoke softly. "We're thinking what we've always thought, that the world holds secrets worth finding. Tonight is proof enough." His voice was deep and calm, and even the fire seemed to soften at his words. Bramble sat a little apart from the others, his cloak pulled close, but he listened keenly. His lean frame and sharp features gave him the look of someone carved from vigilance itself. Where Perrin's grin was careless, Bramble's gaze was careful, calculating. Yet, beneath that constant wariness, there was an unspoken kindness in the way he looked at the wolves, as though he saw in them a mirror of himself, watchful, yet longing for trust. Lark, by contrast, carried herself like a blade. Her braided hair shone dark copper in the glow, her shoulders squared, her boots always ready for the next step. There was steel in her words, but also a quiet loyalty, for though she grumbled, she had followed Bramble and the others through danger more than once, never wavering when it truly mattered. Perrin was the opposite of her in every way, bright-eyed, fair-haired, a smile forever tugging at the corners of his mouth. He was quick with jokes, quick with daggers, and quicker still to throw himself into trouble. He lived as though every danger was an adventure, every risk a story waiting to be told. And Alder, older, broad-shouldered, his beard streaked with gray, was the steady center of them all. Where the others bickered or rushed ahead, Alder walked slowly, his staff grounding him like a tree rooted in deep soil. His wisdom did not come in speeches, but in quiet moments in the way he listened before speaking. Yet, it was not just the four of them that filled the firelit circle that night. For waddling in from the dark came another figure, small, round, and decidedly less noble. He tripped over a root, landed in the moss with a squeak, and scurried toward the fire like a mouse seeking crumbs. By the stars, Perrin laughed, clapping his hands. "Is that a gnome?" The creature straightened indignantly, brushing dirt from his tiny vest. "Not a gnome, a halfling. Thank you very much. Pipwick Tumbletoss at your service. And for the record, I meant to fall. It was a tactical maneuver." Lark groaned. "Oh no, not this." But Pipwick carried on undeterred, puffing out his round chest. He was scarcely taller than a child, with a mop of curly hair and cheeks that seemed permanently rosy. His clothes were patched in a dozen places, and his satchel hung from his shoulder that jingled suspiciously whenever he moved. I couldn't help overhearing, watching from a very safe distance, that you lot were wandering about with wolves the size of barns. Very unsafe, very unwise, so naturally I thought I'd tag along. He plopped himself down near the fire, producing from his satchel a tin cup, a chunk of cheese, and what looked like a bent spoon. It's fate, you see. You'll need someone of my particular talents. Stealing cheese, Bramble muttered. Cheese, secrets, locks, doors, oh, the doors I've opened in my time. Pipwick said proudly. Why, just last week I opened a door that didn't even belong to me. That skill, that is. The wolves stirred at his chatter, but did not rise. The white wolf, head resting on its paws, only flicked an ear as though amused. And so, against all reason, Pipwick Tumbletoss became part of their company. His clumsy antics earned groans and rolled eyes, but his bright spirit lit something in the group they hadn't realized they needed. Even Bramble found himself smiling when Pipwick mistook Alder's staff for a clothesline, or when he offered Lark a pebble, insisting it was an ancient relic of immeasurable power. The night stretched long, filled with laughter, firelight, and the steady breathing of the wolves. None of them knew what awaited or what truth the beasts meant to show them, but together they felt just a little braver. The days that followed felt unlike any the company had ever known. The wolves led them through hidden ways, paths only beasts of such size and wisdom could know. Where rivers foamed wild, the wolves leapt gracefully across, their fur flashing silver in the sun. Where thickets seemed impenetrable, they pressed forward, revealing trails pressed into the earth by paws long before. The company followed, some with awe, others with caution. Alder walked at their center, his staff steady against the roots and stones, his eyes studying the wolves not as animals, but as beings carrying knowledge older than human memory. Bramble watched always from behind, suspicion carving deep lines into his brow. He could not shake the sense that the wolves knew too much, knew where they were going and why. Wolves were beasts, but these moved with purpose, as if guided by voices only they could hear. Lark remained tense as well, her hand never far from the hilt of her blade. Yet even she softened once in the quiet dawn, when a younger wolf, smaller and dark-coated, padded beside her. Its golden eyes met hers with something unspoken, a bond, fragile but undeniable. She said nothing to the others, but from that day her suspicion became tempered with respect. Perrin, of course, was the opposite. He sang to them. He told them stories as they traveled, laughing when one wolf huffed as though unimpressed, or when another playfully shoved him aside while passing. They like me, he boasted one evening, brushing dirt from his cloak after being knocked into the moss. I can tell. They have a very subtle sense of humor. Pipwick, however, lagged at the rear, puffing and complaining. His tiny legs were no match for the stride of wolves, and more than once he had to be hoisted onto Alder's shoulder just to keep pace. Still, his voice carried on through the forest, filling the silence with endless chatter. Did I tell you about the time I outwitted a troll? Well, when I say outwitted, I mean hid under a barrel until he fell asleep. But cleverness takes many forms, you see. The forest grew stranger the deeper they went. Trees twisted higher, their roots tangling like the veins of giants. Moss glowed faintly in the dim light, painting the undergrowth in green fire. Once, the company found a circle of stones taller than houses, etched with runes so faded that even Alder could not read them. The wolves padded around it without hesitation, and so the company followed, though each felt the press of ancient eyes watching from the shadows. On the fourth evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, the wolves halted. The white wolf, leader of the pack, lifted its head and let out a low, resonant growl, not of anger, but of declaration. Before them stretched a valley choked in mist, its floor hidden by shadows. And at its heart, rising like a jagged tooth, stood the ruin of a fortress. Its black stones jutted from the earth, walls collapsed and towers shattered. Yet even broken, it carried a weight of authority, as though daring time itself to erode it. "There," Alder whispered, his hand tightening on his staff. "That is where they lead us." Pipwick shivered, tugging at Perrin's sleeve. "Oh no, dungeons. Why is it always dungeons? Do you know what's in dungeons?" "Things. Things with teeth." "Relax," Perrin said, though his own eyes gleamed with unease. "If there are teeth, they'll probably prefer Pipwick-sized bites first." The wolves waited, silent and unmoving, until at last Bramble stepped forward, his cloak brushing the stones. "So be it," he said, voice low. "Whatever lies inside, we'll face it, together." The wolves dipped their heads, and for the first time, the white one pressed its nose to the earth as if bowing. Then, with a motion both solemn and commanding, it guided them down the slope into the mist. The fortress loomed larger with every step. Its gates were long rotted, its doors shattered, but the air that poured from within was cool and heavy, as though the stones themselves still remembered the weight of secrets. When they crossed the threshold, torches on the walls flared to life of their own accord. No flame, no heat, just pale blue fire that burned without smoke. The wolves padded ahead, as if undisturbed, but the adventurers glanced at one another with unease. This was no ordinary ruin. The dungeon had awoken. The corridors twisted endlessly, their arches supported by pillars carved with spirals and unfamiliar sigils. Dust lay thick on the ground, disturbed only by the silent paws of wolves. The company's footsteps echoed faintly, swallowed quickly by the weight of the stones. "Cheerful place," Pipwick whispered, his voice bouncing off the walls. "Really makes a fellow feel welcome. Cold floors, creepy lights, possibly cursed air. Yes, very homey. Quiet," Bramble snapped, though even he kept his hand close to his dagger. It was Alder who moved with most composure. His staff tapped gently on the stone floor, his eyes sweeping the carvings. "This place is not of our kind," he murmured. "No human built these halls. These are older, far older." At last, they reached a chamber vast and circular, its ceiling vanishing into shadow. At its center stood a pedestal of black stone, polished though untouched for centuries. Upon it rested a single object, a book. Its cover was bound in weathered leather, etched with faintly glowing lines that pulsed like veins of starlight. The wolves circled the pedestal but did not approach it, their golden eyes fixed upon the adventurers, waiting. Perrin whistled low. "Well, I don't suppose that's just a cook's journal." "No," Alder said, his voice heavy with awe. "This is older than any record known to our kind. This is a chronicle of beginnings." As they drew closer, the book stirred. Its cover shifted slightly, as though breathing. The air grew heavy, thick with the hum of unseen energy. Each of them felt it. The pull, the quiet whisper in the back of the mind that promised answers to questions they had never dared ask. Bramble reached out first, then stopped, his hand trembling. "What if it is cursed? Then we suffer together," Lark said firmly, stepping beside him. It was Alder who finally lifted the book. The moment his hands touched the leather, the chamber lit with threads of light that raced along the walls, filling every rune, every carving. The ceiling above shimmered, revealing a vast mural painted in stars. Mountains rose in those stars, seas shimmered, forests spread, an entire world painted upon the sky. The book opened of its own accord, its pages whispering. The words upon them were not written in one tongue, but many, shifting and changing so that each of the adventurers understood them differently. Yet the meaning was clear. This was the story of their world. It told of a balance, forces woven into the land, sea, and sky that held the world together. It spoke of beings who had once walked openly among mortals, shaping rivers, raising mountains, binding the laws that governed life. And it spoke of a breaking, that those who shaped the world had vanished, their tools scattered, their memory buried. As the adventurers read, the wolves bowed their heads, silent guardians of this truth. For it was clear now, they were not guides by chance. They were chosen to bring mortals back to knowledge long forgotten. Pipwick swallowed hard, his usual levity gone. That's not the sort of book you borrow for a bedtime story. No, Alder said softly, his eyes glinting with reverence. It is the book that explains why the world still stands, and perhaps why it trembles. The chamber grew quiet. Each of them felt the weight of what had been revealed, as though the very ground beneath them demanded they choose. Keep this truth hidden or carry it into the world. And as the wolves raised their heads once more, their golden eyes burning bright in the blue fire, the company knew their journey had only just begun. The book had not been open more than a few minutes when the ground began to tremble. Dust rained from the ceiling, the faint blue fire along the walls flickering erratically. The wolves growled low, circling tightly as if sensing what the adventurers could not. Bramble was the first to notice. "The door," he hissed, pointing to the archway they had entered through. It was closing. Stone slid across stone with a grinding roar until the entrance sealed completely, vanishing into the wall as though it had never existed. "We're trapped," Lark said, voice calm but cold. Her hand gripped her sword hilt, though no blade could cut through solid rock. Pipwick groaned, tugging at his hair. I knew it. You touch a mysterious glowing book in a creepy dungeon, and what happens? Boom, no exits. Classic Doom scenario. Honestly, I don't know why I stay with you people. Alder ignored him, clutching the book. Its pages fluttered rapidly, though no wind stirred. Symbols lit up and rearranged themselves across the parchment, glowing faintly. "It is not punishing us," he murmured. "It is testing us." The wolves barked once, a sharp sound that echoed through the chamber. Then, as if answering, a section of the far wall slid downward, revealing a corridor lit by more of the pale fire. Bramble exhaled slowly. So the way forward is the only way left. They stepped into the new passage, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust carpeting the floor. The corridor twisted at unnatural angles, bending in ways that made the stomach churn. Once, Lark swore the walls shifted behind them, erasing the way they had come. The first trial awaited in a wide hall supported by pillars carved into the likeness of towering figures, guardians with blank faces, their arms folded across their chests. In the center of the hall, the floor was divided into hundreds of square tiles, each etched with a rune. Alder knelt to inspect them. "It's a puzzle," he said gravely. The runes correspond to elements: fire, water, earth, wind. But only one path will carry us across safely. And what happens if we step on the wrong one? Perrin asked. As if to answer, Pipwick accidentally nudged a loose pebble onto a nearby tile. The rune glowed red. A heartbeat later, the pillar nearest them shifted its arm and brought it crashing down upon the square with bone-rattling force, pulverizing the stone to dust. Pipwick squealed. That happens. Oh, delightful. Just delightful. The wolves growled, pacing at the edge of the puzzle. Alder studied the runes carefully, muttering under his breath. The book, yes, the book shows the pattern. He turned the pages until a diagram revealed itself. The same floor, marked with a sequence of glowing symbols. He guided them forward tile by tile, each step a held breath. The wolves crossed first, with uncanny grace, following Alder's directions exactly. Then came the adventurers. Perrin hummed nervously as he hopped from one tile to another, while Bramble moved with quiet determination. Pipwick, clutching the hem of Alder's cloak, stumbled several times, but was yanked back just before disaster. At last, they reached the other side, breathless but alive. The Guardians fell silent once more, their arms returning to rest. That, Pipwick declared, wiping sweat from his brow, was entirely unnecessary. Whoever designed this place had serious trust issues. But Alder's eyes were still on the book. Its pages glowed faintly, as though rewarding them with more knowledge. Words etched themselves across the parchment. Only the worthy may carry the truth. Prove yourselves or remain buried. The adventurers exchanged uneasy glances. This was no mere chronicle. It was a living trial, and the trials had only begun. The second chamber opened after another twisting corridor, its walls breathing faint drafts of air as though alive. Here, the floor fell away into a vast pit. Bridges of stone stretched across, narrow and crumbling, some broken entirely. But what filled the pit below drew gasps from all. A sea of molten fire, its glow pulsing like the heart of the earth. The heat struck them instantly. Pipwick fanned himself dramatically. Wonderful, trapped in a furnace. Exactly what I wanted. Alder consulted the book again. The text shifted to reveal drawings of the chamber, with notes written in strange, flowing script. It says the bridges change, he said, his voice taut. Only one will lead us across. The others will collapse. Bramble's jaw tightened. So, we guessed wrong. We fall in a fire. Perfect. The wolves padded forward, their paws surprisingly sure even on the narrow stone. They tested the first bridge. No cracks, no trembling. With a collective glance back at the company, they moved steadily across. Lark led the others after them, her balance steady as if born for such peril. Perrin followed with less grace, muttering a song under his breath to calm his nerves. Bramble went next, his eyes sharp, his steps slow but precise. Pipwick, however, froze. He stared at the yawning pit of fire, shaking his head violently. No, absolutely not. My legs don't do heights, or lava, or certain death. Alder, holding the book tight, crouched down beside him. Pipwick, listen to me. Fear does not diminish danger. It magnifies it. Walk, and if you falter, I will catch you. For once, Pipwick swallowed his reply and nodded. His knees knocked with every step, but he followed, clinging to Alder's cloak like a lifeline. Halfway across, a rumble shook the chamber. The bridge ahead cracked, crumbling into the fire. Perrin cried out, stumbling back. The other path, Alder skjutet pointing. To the right, a smaller bridge was forming out of the molten rock itself, cooling rapidly into solid stone. The wolves bounded toward it without hesitation. The adventurers scrambled after them, leaping from one bridge to the next just as the old one collapsed. The heat seared their faces, ash rising in thick clouds. They reached the far side together, panting and shaken. The wolves shook out their fur, unbothered by the ordeal. Then the book flared open again. New words burned upon the page. Balance is trial. Trial is survival. To know the world, one must endure its fire. Bramble spat into the dust. Cryptic riddles. Always riddles. I'd rather face an enemy I can stab. Careful what you wish for, Lark murmured, for in the shadows ahead, the next test was already waiting. The third trial chamber was unlike the others. No fire, no puzzles of stone. Instead, it was a vast circular room with walls covered in mirrors, hundreds of them, each reflecting not just the adventurers, but countless variations of them. Some reflections were taller, some older, some armed with weapons they did not carry. In one mirror, Bramble saw himself cloaked in black, blade dripping with unseen blood. In another, Alder's reflection had no eyes, only burning light. Perrin appeared as a crowned king in one glass, and as a skeletal corpse in another. Pipwick yelped when his reflection sneered back at him, baring sharp teeth he did not have. Nope. No, no, no. Don't like this at all. The wolves growled uneasily, their fur bristling. Even they were doubled in strange ways. Some reflections showing beasts of fire, others of shadow. Alder opened the book again, and this time the words seemed to etch themselves in rhythm with his heartbeat. To hold the truth, you must face yourselves. Lies and fear bind you stronger than chains. Suddenly, the mirrors rippled. From them stepped the reflections, twisted doubles, mockeries of the adventurers. Dark Bramble raised his blade with a cruel grin. Hollow-eyed, Alder lifted a staff that burned with false fire. Perrin's corpse staggered forward with a broken lute in hand. Even Pipwick's reflection crept forward, teeth bared like a predator. The chamber erupted in chaos. Steel rang as Lark clashed against her mirror self, both moving with equal speed. Bramble fought his darker twin fiercely, every blow like striking himself. Perrin, wild-eyed, tried to fend off his undead copy with desperate strums of song that cracked the air. Pipwick fled, squealing, until one of the wolves snarled and pinned his reflection to the ground, breaking the illusion. It was then Alder realized these shadows were not defeated by strength, but by defiance. They are lies, he shouted. Do not fight them, deny them. He raised his staff, his voice echoing. I am Alder, and I will not be unmade. His reflection burst apart into shards of light. Bramble gritted his teeth. I am no killer of the innocent, he growled, slashing through his twin until it dissolved. Lark's blade pierced her reflection's chest as she hissed, You are not me. One by one, the false selves fell, shattering into dust. The mirrors cracked and melted away, leaving only smooth stone walls. The book pulsed with light, opening once more. But this time, instead of riddles, it showed a vision. Vast skies, oceans churning, mountains splitting. Voices whispered through the chamber. The world is bound by truths forgotten. You who seek must choose. Carry the burden of knowledge, or leave it to die here. The wolves howled, the sound filling the chamber like a hymn. The adventurers stood, breathless, shaken, but resolute. For they knew this dungeon was not simply testing them. It was forging them into keepers of a secret that could change everything. And somewhere deep within the fortress, another rumble stirred. The dungeon was not finished with them yet. The chamber of mirrors crumbled behind them, melting into bare stone as though it had never been. The company pressed forward, following the wolves, who padded with uncanny certainty through the winding corridors. Their glowing eyes caught the torchlight, guiding the adventurers like guardians of the dark. But the deeper they went, the more the dungeon seemed alive. The walls pulsed faintly, as though veins carried some unseen lifeblood through the rock. The floor shifted beneath their boots, sometimes lengthening the path, sometimes narrowing it until they were forced single file. Even the air itself grew heavier, like the place was trying to suffocate them. Pipwick wheezed dramatically, tugging at his collar. I swear this dungeon is breathing. Do dungeons breathe? Because this one breathes, and I, for one, would very much like it to stop. Lark hushed him, though her own hand stayed on her sword. It wants us to fear. That's its game. Bramble scowled, eyes darting to every shadow. Fear I can manage. It's what comes after fear that concerns me. The wolves suddenly halted at the entrance to a vast cavern. The floor was broken into floating platforms of stone, suspended above a void so deep it swallowed even the torchlight. The platforms shifted slowly, sliding apart and back together, as though in some deliberate rhythm. On the nearest platform, runes flared to life, the same style as those from the puzzle hall. Alder opened the book, and sure enough, the page had shifted to show the pattern. It is a sequence, he said, a dance across the stones. Perrin gulped audibly. Oh good. a dance over an endless abyss. Nothing terrifying about that. The wolves leapt first, weightless and graceful, landing on the glowing stones with perfect timing. Then it was the adventurer's turn. Lark led the way, her balance as sharp as her blade. Perrin followed, nearly missing a step until Bramble caught his wrist and pulled him forward. Alder moved with quiet focus, eyes darting between the stones and the book. Pipwick, however, screamed with every leap, clinging to Alder's cloak until both of them nearly toppled. Midway through, the rhythm of the platform shifted. The glowing runes changed, their order scrambling. Stones fell away into the abyss with thunderous crashes. The book's pages flared, writing itself faster than Alder could read. Left, 2 forward. Jump, he shouted, guiding them as stones disappeared beneath their feet. One of the wolves nearly slipped but caught the edge with its claws, pulling itself up in a spray of sparks. At last, they tumbled on a solid ground, gasping and trembling. Pipwick collapsed to the floor. I went on record. I did not sign up for vanishing floors. I signed up for safe, cozy adventures with occasional pie. Not death pits. But Alder wasn't listening. The book had revealed another fragment. The world is bound by threads unseen. To pull one is to unravel the rest. Knowledge is the blade that severs or saves. The meaning was unclear, but his chest felt heavier as he closed the pages. The dungeon was shaping them for something far greater than survival. The next chamber roared before they even reached it. The sound of rushing water grew louder until they entered a cavern where waterfalls cascaded from unseen heights into a vast underground lake. The air was cool and wet, mist curling around them like ghosts. Though none here were spectral, only the dungeon's endless challenges. A stone walkway stretched across the lake, but halfway through, it broke into sections, each floating like a raft. They drifted constantly, carried by unseen currents. We'll have to jump between them, Lark said, narrowing her eyes. Or drown, Bramble added grimly. Or, Pipwick piped up, we sit here until someone invents a bridge. Any volunteers? No. Then I proposed turning back. No turning back, Alder said firmly, holding the book. The pages shimmered with faint blue light, mirroring the water. It shows currents, which rafts are safe, which lead only to whirlpools. Indeed, dark spirals churned in the distance, ready to swallow anything unlucky enough to drift near. The wolves leapt first, paddling easily when rafts drifted too far apart. Their size and strength made the challenge almost laughable. The adventurers followed, far less gracefully. Bramble led with steady leaps. Lark was sure-footed, but had to grab Perrin's arm twice when he nearly slipped. Pipwick squealed as he landed belly first on a raft, soaked through, muttering about contractual obligations. Midway across, the lake itself rebelled. The waterfalls grew louder, the current stronger. A whirlpool began forming near their path, pulling entire rafts into its spiral. The book, Bramble barked. Alder scanned the pages. Left. Jump now. They leapt from raft to raft, barely avoiding the pull. At one point, Perrin slipped completely, falling into the water. A wolf plunged in after him, dragging him back up with powerful strokes before the whirlpool claimed him. Coughing and sputtering, Perrin clung to the beast, whispering thanks. At last, soaked and exhausted, they reached the far shore. The wolves shook themselves, spraying water everywhere. Pipwick groaned. Wonderful. We're alive but damp. I hate being damp. The book revealed more as Alder caught his breath. Water is memory. It carries all things. To drink deeply is to know the past. To drown is to lose the present. LOTR. This book, it isn't just knowledge. It is the foundation of our world. And the dungeon clearly intended to show them every peril that foundation carried. By the time they reached the next chamber, exhaustion pressed heavily on them all. Yet this final test was unlike any they had seen. It was a circular hall, its walls engraved with runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. At its center rose a pedestal, upon which sat the book, yet Alder already held the book in his hands. "What trick is this?" Bramble growled, hand on his blade. The wolves circled warily, hackles raised. Alder stepped forward. The book in his hands flared with golden light, and words appeared across both copies at once. "Choose. Only one may leave this place. The true book or the false. Choose wrong, and all perish." The air grew heavy. The walls began to rumble, cracks forming above as stones threatened to fall. Pipwick whimpered, "Oh good, a riddle with our lives at stake. Because clearly we haven't had enough of those." Alder's mind raced. Both books looked identical. Both pulsed with the same light. He closed his eyes, listening, not with ears, but with the strange sense the book itself had awoken in him. One heartbeat felt steady, real. The other faltered like an echo. He stepped to the pedestal, his hand hovering. "Wait," Bramble said sharply. "Are you sure?" Alder nodded. "One is a reflection, like the mirrors. It carries no truth." He reached out and chose. The moment his hand closed around the pedestal's book, the other vanished from his pack, dissolving into dust. The chamber quaked violently, but then the rumbling stopped. The walls stilled. The book pulsed once more, opening to reveal its final truth. This world is not as it seems. Its laws were written, its order crafted. You who read this now bear the burden of knowing. Reality is built, not born. Silence filled the chamber as the weight of the words sank in. Perrin's face was pale. "Our world was made," Bramble scowled. "By who? And why?" Alder closed the book, his hands trembling. "That I do not yet know, but this book will tell us. In time." The wolves howled, their voices echoing like a promise. They had survived the dungeon, but what they carried now was not just survival. It was knowledge that could change everything. And with that knowledge came danger far greater than anything the dungeon had thrown at them. The dungeon did not let them leave easily. The chamber's silence shattered into a roar. The moment Alder closed the book, the walls cracked open, and the floor beneath them shifted like a sliding puzzle. Whole slabs of stone lurched and twisted, splitting their company apart. Lara cried out as she was carried toward a deep chasm, her footing barely holding. Perrin tried to reach her, but was cut off by a rising wall of jagged stone. Pipwick screamed, clutching a wolf's tail as the platform under him lurched sideways. "It's trying to crush us alive," Bramble bellowed, bracing himself against a grinding wall. The wolves howled, bounding effortlessly from one shifting slab to the next. One of them seized Lark by her cloak, dragging her onto a safer platform. Another barked sharply at Alder, urging him forward. "The book," Alder shouted. He opened it, and the words shimmered. "The dungeon bends to fear. Fear is its mortar, its chain. Unmake fear, and the walls will fall." How do we unmake fear while we're about to be flattened? Pipwick shrieked, clinging for dear life. Bramble's voice thundered above the chaos. "Stand together. Don't let it scatter us." With grit and sheer stubbornness, they fought the dungeon's design. Bramble smashed his shoulder against a grinding slab, forcing a gap open. Lark leapt through, catching Perrin's hand and dragging him across. The wolves herded Pipwick forward despite his flailing protests. At last, they converged on a single stone at the chamber's center, the only one that had not moved. Alder raised the book high. "We are not afraid." He shouted into the roaring walls. The wolves howled with him. Bramble lifted his sword. Lark raised her shield. Even Pipwick, voice cracking, managed a squeaky, "Yes." Not afraid at all. The walls trembled and then stopped. Slowly, the grinding stone retreated. The chasms closed. The chambers stilled, leaving them breathless but alive. Alder's heart pounded. The book's glow softened, and new words appeared. Fear built this place. Courage breaks it. The dungeon's last corridor stretched before them, lit by golden light. For the first time since they had entered, there was no shifting stone, no trickery, no traps waiting in silence. Just a long hall ending in a massive door carved with wolves. The pack padded ahead, noses low, tails swaying. Their glowing eyes reflected a calm certainty. This was the way out. The door loomed high, its carvings ancient and deep. Wolves circled a sun at its center, their bodies entwined with flowing runes. Alder touched the book, and the door shimmered. It says, "The gate opens only when the bonded howl together," Alder murmured. "Wolves immortals as one." The pack lifted their heads and howled, long and mournful. The sound shook the stones. One by one, the adventurers added their voices, hesitant at first, then stronger. Bramble's growl-like rumble, Lark's clear tone, Perrin's wavering cry, even Pipwick's squeak. Alder raised his voice last, carrying the book in both hands. The chamber shook. The sun carving blazed with golden light. The massive stone doors groaned open, revealing the cool night air beyond. Stars spilled into the hall. Fresh wind filled their lungs, washing away the dungeon's suffocating breath. The wolves bounded out first, their paws striking free soil. The adventurers followed, stumbling into the starlit forest. Behind them, the dungeon's gates sealed shut with a thunderous finality, as though it had never existed. They had escaped. Pipwick collapsed on the grass, arms flung wide. "I shall never enter anything underground again. Basements, cellars, even slightly deep ditches. I renounce them all." The others laughed, though weariness lined their faces. The book lay heavy in Alder's hands, glowing softly as though pleased. Around the fire that night, they sat in silence. The wolves gathered close like shadows with golden eyes. The air was still, and the stars wheeled overhead. Alder finally spoke, his voice low. "This book, it has shown us that our world is not natural. It was made, crafted with purpose, bound by rules like threads in a tapestry." Bramble's gaze was hard. If someone made our world, someone controls it, someone has power over us all. And if we know this, Lark added, her eyes sharp, we are dangerous to those who would keep it hidden. Perrin shivered, drawing his cloak tighter. But why hide it? Why bury the truth in dungeons and puzzles? Because truth is more dangerous than any sword, Alder whispered. The wolves lifted their heads, watching him with knowing eyes. Perhaps they understood more than mortals ever could. Pipwick sighed dramatically. "Well, if the world is some grand invention, I'd very much like to know where the inventor keeps the pie." Surely they thought of pie. Despite everything, laughter broke the tension. But it was thin laughter, edged with the weight of what they carried. The book pulsed again, and Alder saw one final line scrawl across its page. "Seek the origin. Find the hand that wrote the world." He closed it slowly, his heart heavy. Their journey had not ended in the dungeon. It had only begun. The wolves howled into the night, their voices echoing across the forest. And beneath the starlight, the adventurers knew they were no longer wanderers. They were bearers of a truth that could reshape the fate of their world. And the world, Alder feared, would not be ready. The end. The world still held countless mysteries, and now they knew countless dangers too. Yet in that knowledge there was hope, for they had proven that even the deepest shadows could be met with steady hands and brave hearts. Thank you for joining us on this journey. May the echoes of these tales linger with you, reminding you that adventure lives not only in far-off lands, but in the courage to step forward, even when the path is hidden. Until the next story, see you later.